Hello, my name is Doug Sharp, host of the National Leadership Briefing. It is good to be with you again here today, and very excited to be coming to you at this time in Canada, where we are definitely experiencing some challenges out there. And it's our absolute pleasure here at the National Leadership Briefing and Canada Family Action to bring you solutions to those problems. You know, that's one of the rules here at Canada Family Action. We will not present you with a problem that we do not also provide you with a solution alongside of it. So we're not going to get you all excited and upset today. We're going to actually talk to you about some very serious issues that are happening here in Canada, but we're also going to be talking about what we believe is going to be the best way to tackle those challenges before us. So let me tell you a little bit more about what we're going to be covering here today on the briefing. First of all, of course, as I mentioned in the previous midweek touch points, because of the success of the conservativeupdate.com website and the initiatives that led us through the Conservative Party leadership election race, we have many new people onboarded into the process, people who have come on to the National Leadership Briefing. They're here for the first time. They're excited, but they want to make sure that they've got all the right information so they can most effectively move forward together with us. So today on the National Leadership Briefing, we have placed it as a priority to teach the learning segments that each of us have already perhaps seen before, but I want to make sure we go over some of the things we've said before so that the new people get started right. Things like the 4 pillars, things like the teaching templates that we use when we talk about the various forms of governments in our society and the importance of us operating within our sphere of influence. We're also going to be, of course, helping to share strategies of how we can combine our influence to tackle some of these serious challenges that we have here in Canada. So all of you new people that are here today, we are excited to have you here. You could not have picked a better time to join the National Leadership Briefing because we've got so much that we can accomplish together ahead of us on the road. Now, what else are we going to talk about? Well, we're going to spend some time at my desk, do some teaching on the 4 pillars, but then we're going to go into the boardroom and reveal to you some of the specific challenges we're having now with the overstepping of civil government, the infringement of their authority on the lives of the citizens of Canada. And as I said before, you are going to learn strategies on how you can help push back against civil government and keep them well within the limits of their authority, constitutional authority. So we're going to talk about that as well. And then finally today, I am going to share the best news of all. We're going to talk about the future. As you know, we are always trying to get out ahead of waves. We don't want to be the kind of people in Canada that sit around and wait to react to the things that come upon us. We want to show some foresight, look ahead at some of the challenges that might be coming our way, and see if we can't get an advantage on that by preparing for the future ahead. So we're going to do that today as well on the National Leadership Briefing and talk about something all important called the Civic Affairs Committees and how those can be very, very effective tools in the hands of churches, church leaders, and church families so that they can help interact and prepare for challenges on the road ahead. So thank you so much again for joining us on the National Leadership Briefing. I'm going to head over to my desk and get ready to serve you there. And in the meantime, enjoy this quick video. Talk to you soon. Thanks again for joining us. These are the things that we believe in. First, that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. Second, that those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. Number three, that the laws and policies of civil government must provide for the safety and security of the citizens, especially the vulnerable among us. And number four, that it is inappropriate to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. They came from you. They're your pillars. They're the things that you believe. That is good enough for us. That should be good enough for our elected representatives. Okay, let's get started. Good to be with you here at the desk. Now, I just want to confirm for you again, we respect your time here on the National Leadership Briefing. We will definitely have you in and out in 1 hour, and I will make sure that you will feel at the end of our time together that that is time well spent, and you will be eagerly looking forward to the midweek touch points ahead and the next National Leadership Briefing. Also want to confirm for you that we are going to be spending some time today near the end of the briefing doing a quick review of the outcome of the CPC leadership election race. And I'm going to show you something today that is 100% going to confirm in your mind and in your heart the need for us to come together in Canada to tackle these challenges using our combined influence. We have proof in the pudding, and I'm going to show you the pudding today, and you're going to be absolutely convinced it's the right thing to do. Now, we've got, again, a lot of new folks on the briefing today, and I want to make sure that they're getting started right here today. So we're going to start with the 4 pillars. Now, the 4 pillars are the things that we rally around here on the National Leadership Briefing. We have in Canada all sorts of opportunities to advance all sorts of ideas, but here on the National Leadership Briefing, we focus on 4 things, and I'm going to tell you that story today about what they are and where they came from. But most importantly, I want you to know that in the post-briefing notes today, you're also going to be receiving a scripted copy of the 4 pillar story so that you can share it with other people and invite them to the National Leadership Briefing and rally around these same things as well. Now, when you hear the story, you're going to find out that it is a great story and worthy of being told, but it also has proven to be something that is very effective for people to use to attract people to our cause. And that, of course, is the advancement of our principles into society, culture, politics, and government. So here, let's get started now, and let me tell you the greatest story, well, of recent times anyway, about the 4 pillars and where they came from. Here we are. Now, it was in the fall of 2016 when the first of a citizen surveys process started, going out across the country to leaders of centers of influence within the faith communities of Canada. Were these surveys that asked them very simple questions. They asked the faith community leaders what they believed were the issues and the challenges that were before them and what they were facing in their communities. We wanted to know what were their priorities and what was important to them. Now, one important part of the ask in the surveys was that faith leaders would share their feedback only on the issues that they felt completely comfortable discussing with their church family members or to others within their spheres of influence. The survey process also asked that their view of the issues brought forward could be communicated using secular language to those people who perhaps were not familiar with church life or to people that were outside of their sphere of influence. Well, the responses were overwhelming. In the surveys, we received feedback on human trafficking concerns, prostitution law, pornography and the availability of it. The euthanasia law was being advanced at the time, and they were concerned about the vulnerable people, marijuana legislation, abortion, polyamorous relationships, education, freedom of religion, child protection, gender theory, debt, and taxation were just a few of the issues that were named in the survey. Anything and everything that you can imagine appeared to be represented in the mix of the data that was collected. But here is where something very interesting was noted. When you stood back and you looked at all of these issues and points of view from the church in Canada, every one of these individual issues and the way they were expressed could be categorized in just a few silos or groups. The issue of prostitution law, for example, was often expressed as concern for vulnerable young women and girls. And when you looked at yet another issue, such as abortion policy, the very same concern was paramount: the well being of women and young girls. Another example, common concerns related to the future of our children were clear when you held up an issue like education and parental authority up against the issue of up against the issue of excessive government debt and taxation. A common concern was expressed in both of these cases for our children and future generations, and the negative impact that these challenges could have on families. So ultimately, it was discovered that virtually all of the issues and concerns expressed in the survey results could actually be reduced down and filed into one of four silos, or what have come to be known here on the National Leadership Briefing as pillars. The first pillar, and the single largest issue expressed by far, was the common belief that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. Parents just wanted to be free to raise their children with the same values and in the same faith tradition. That was all. So simply expressed, but clearly a priority to those who responded: a desire to raise your children the way you want. Now, the second pillar, or silo, represented over a large number of responses, was that those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. Again, so simply put, but of such great importance to those who participated in the surveys. And it was interesting that leaders and centers of influence that we spoke to felt that those elected to serve us must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. Not should, but rather must. It was a non-negotiable point in so many ways. In other words, it's not okay for an elected person to act in a way that would deny us as citizens our right of belief and freedom of religion. And to be clear, we were talking about the religious freedom of all people and not just members of the faith communities of Canada. Now, the third pillar, which is what I believe is the true heart of the faith community here in Canada, is that the laws and policies of civil government must provide for the safety and security of the citizens, especially the vulnerable that live among us in our communities. So the laws and policies of government, at the very least, must check the box of being safe and provide for security of all citizens, but especially provide protection for vulnerable citizens that live among us. People like the homeless, the drug addicted, the shut-in elderly, of course, that's so important right now, and the lonely. The young girl who is told by her doctor that she's pregnant. She's very vulnerable in that moment. People who feel as though there's no hope. The people that are frustrated by mobility challenges or chronic conditions. All of these citizens must first be protected by any policy or laws that are passed by civil government. Now, finally, the fourth pillar, a very sensible posture related to finances, is that we believe on the National Leadership Briefing, because of the input and the feedback we got in these surveys, that it is inappropriate to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. So as far back as the fall of 2016, it was clear that we, the people in Canada that were surveyed in this survey, we believe that the spending of money today, calling it an investment in our children's future, when what it really is structural debt that will carry an interest rate long into the life of our children, is unacceptable fiscal policy. Buying things for us today that civil government will excessively tax our children to pay for in the future is unacceptable flat out. But that was it. Those are the four pillars. Let me again review them quickly. The four pillars are: first, that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want. Number two, that those we elect to serve us in civil government must respect and defend our right of belief and freedom of religion. Number three, that the laws and policies of civil government must provide for the safety and security of the citizens, especially the vulnerable that live among us in our communities. And of course, number 4, that it is inappropriate for civil government to heap debt upon the backs of our children and future generations. So these are the 4 things that we focus on here at the National Leadership Briefing. These are the pillars that we rally around. These are the things that we encourage churches to teach on. These are the things that we encourage moms and dads to share with their children. These are the things that we share with candidates and politicians when they ask us for our support. And it is because it is these things that are the most important issues to the faith communities of Canada. So when civil government proposes a piece of legislation, these are the points that we hold that legislation up against to see if it represents our views and values. And when a politician speaks, this is now the litmus test for whether or not we are listening to someone in government who understands our worldview and will defend our right to have it. And now, if government leaders enact policy that limits our right as parents to raise our children the way we want, well, we look for new government leaders. If civil government leaders recklessly pass a law that puts vulnerable people in our communities at risk, we withdraw our support from them and look for another place to put it. If government leaders enact policies that don't respect our right of belief and freedom of religion, or just as important these days, if they refuse to defend it against the barrage of attacks that come at us as people of faith, these government leaders are replaced at the very next electoral opportunity with someone who will. And finally, with our children in mind, if politicians spend so much money today that a yoke of excessive taxation is placed around the necks of our children in the future, forcing them to pay for it, well, we're going to be making a change. Asking people of faith in this survey was what I believe was the smartest thing that we could do. You know what works. You know what prospers people and produces positive health outcomes for our children, our neighbor, and our nation. Now, I'd like to make a suggestion. If these 4 pillars sound to you like a good representation of the views and values that you have, why don't you make a commitment right now to join us each month on this National Leadership Briefing? It's easy to just pop in and out and in and out. But if you make a commitment to join us each month as we build brick by brick by brick, the strategies to exercise influence in the realms of society, culture, politics, and government, I know you won't be disappointed committing 1 hour a month to advancing these issues and these ideas. It's a time for only 1 hour once a month that we focus on these 4 pillars and discuss how we can advance these things into culture, politics, and government. So why don't you make that commitment right now? It's a place where we're going to encourage pastors to teach about things from the Bible. We're going to encourage you to actually let us know, what do you think God has to say about parents raising their children the way they want? What do you think God has to say about civil government operating within its own limits of authority? Well, these are the things that we're going to be focusing on the immediate road ahead, and we are excited that you're here, but we don't want you to wander off. We'd like you to stick with us and add your influence to ours and grow our combined influence so that we have a greater impact when we advance these ideas. Now, what I'm going to commit to right now for you is, if you do that, if you commit 1 hour a month to joining us on the National Leadership Briefing, I'm going to make a commitment right now, and that is that I am going to constantly be scanning the horizon in Canada, not only at the federal level, but also at the provincial level of government and at the municipal levels of government and even school boards. I am going to be scanning the horizon and looking for opportunities where you can allow us to all work together to advance your ideas into those different spheres. All I'm asking you to do is stay in touch with us and stay connected, because that's where our power comes from, and our authority together can be applied, is by us all coming together once a month, setting aside the things that we differ on. You know, if we get too close together and we start looking too closely at each other, there's, I'm sure, a lot of things that we could probably say we differ on. But if we can just agree that parents have the right to raise their children the way they want, and we want to advance that idea into civil government, if we just can agree that heaping debt upon the backs of our children is not appropriate fiscal policy, and we can advance that into provincial government legislation and into our provincial government leaders, well, why don't we do that together? So I'm making that commitment to you, and I'm encouraging you to make a commitment to join us here on the National Leadership Briefing once again. So those are the 4 pillars, and we look forward to serving you in that way. Now, what I'm going to be doing next is I'm going to show you how wise the people were to identify these four pillars with the National Leadership Briefing, because I'm going to show you in a real practical example in the boardroom during a teaching exercise. I'm going to show you how you actually apply these ideas and have them become an advantage for us within these spheres. I'm going to actually put it on the board and I'm going to show you immediately how it works. So stick around for that. Now, in the meantime, take a quick look at this video here, and then I'm going to walk over to the boardroom here and we're going to spend a little time in there doing some teaching and training. And then we're going to be coming back to the desk to finish things off later on. So thanks so much for your time here at the desk, and we'll talk to you again shortly. Okay, here we are in the boardroom, and as I promised, we are going to be showing you a practical illustration of why the four pillars are so key and how they can be utilized strategically when we all come together and support them and advance them using our combined influence. Okay, now this teaching template that I have behind me, this is something that is quite familiar to those who have been on the briefing before. But again, if you're new, we want to get you started right and tell you a little bit about this. We have this exact same copy of what you see behind me on the board on the National Leadership Briefing website, available for download. Now, for ease, I'm going to be including a link in the post-briefing notes today so that you're going to be able to download this easily and share this information with your friends. However, remember, you're also going to be getting the recorded segments of each of these training segments today in the briefing, so you could share that as well if you feel uncomfortable sharing this with other people. But I do want to use this teaching template to, again, demonstrate to you just how effective it is to use the four pillars to achieve our common goals. So here we go. This is the teaching template that speaks to the issue of authority and jurisdiction in our society today. If you look behind me here, you see four different categories which represent four different governments or spheres of authority that exist in society today. And these are actually biblically defined as well in the Bible. If you wanted to look for these in the Bible, you would also find them also there as well, to just demonstrate what I'm speaking about when I talk about spheres of authority and influence within those spheres. Now let's take a look at them individually. We have self-government, that's you. You have, again, there are four governments or four spheres of authority, but there's you with self-government. This is your sphere of authority. Your jurisdictional limit of authority is identified by the outside line here, but everywhere within your life, you have authority to operate. You have the right to make decisions about your own life. You can decide what time you get up in the morning and what time you go to bed at night. And all of these decisions that you can make about what you have for dinner, lunch, breakfast, whatever it is, how often you exercise, how you treat your kids, everything is actually decided within this sphere of authority. And you have that authority, again, up to a very, very well-defined and appropriate limit. We also have family government in our society, where groups of people get together and you have a mother and a father and their kids, and they together as a family, the parents make decisions within that sphere of authority up to the jurisdictional limit of that authority as to what school the kids go to and whether they go to church on Sunday and how they spend their time, their free time, whether they're on Netflix or whether they're having devotions. All of this is decided within the family. You have church government, of course, as well, which many of you are familiar with, and of course, the all-important civil government. That is the other form of civil government. Now, this isn't the limit of all of the governments in society. We also have the government of the marketplace, which we'll be talking about again on a future national leadership briefing. But for now, we'll use these four as an illustration. Civil government, of all of the 4 different forms of government, we always like to point out that they are unique among all of the other forms of government, because this is the only government in our society that has unique powers. And those powers are, first, to legislate. We grant civil government the power to legislate for the good of all of society. They are able to make laws. We also give them the right and empower them to tax. So these special powers to legislate and to tax are unique to civil government, and they can be applied and have influence and impact on all the other forms of government. Now, where does civil government get its power? I mean, it just doesn't just come out of thin air. No, in fact, what happens is that individuals in society get together in tribes, and they gather around their ideas and hoist individuals on their shoulders and say, go represent us in government. And they have elections and they gather people together. And then as they choose their people during an electoral process, that's what this is. This is a conduit with which they transfer authority over to civil government so that civil government can act. Now, this transfer of authority is transferred in the form of what's called mandate. So we get together as citizens during an electoral process, and we gather our authority together as citizens, and we communicate or convey it to civil government so that they can execute a plan that we have approved of at election time. That is where civil government gets its authority. Now, in Canada, the sphere of authority and the jurisdictional limit of that authority is defined by documents like our Constitution. Our Constitution clearly lays out the provincial government's authority, the federal government's authority, and we can refer to those foundational documents in our society. We also have something called the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which actually is intended to protect the citizen from civil government, and we can reference that document to make sure that we are having civil government operate within its appropriate sphere of influence. Now, the only time that anyone would ever cross over and beyond their jurisdictional limit of their authority is with something we call here at the National Leadership Briefing permissions. That is right, permissions. So for example, if a family as a form of government granted permission to the church to speak into or have authority within their family, then they would grant the church permission to actually operate outside of its jurisdictional limit of its authority and have influence in the family. As an individual, we actually give up some of our authority to participate as individuals within a family. And of course, with civil government, though, because we grant them special permissions, or special authority, pardon me, we don't grant them special permissions. Because we grant them special authority, we are in fact granting them permissions to operate outside of their jurisdictional limit of authority so that they can actually influence and impact our lives in a positive way. But what happens if, and this is the key question, is what happens if civil government reaches out beyond its jurisdictional limit of its authority and gets engaged in the church sphere, the family sphere, and sphere of the individual? What if they do that without permissions and without a mandate? So in other words, they're not given a mandate to act in this way. They're not granted special permissions to act in this way, yet they use the power, the special powers that we grant them through an election in the form of a mandate. They use that power in a corrupt way, and they impose their authority on the church, on families, and on the individuals. What is that called? Well, that is called tyranny. So if a civil government is operating outside of a jurisdictional limit of its authority, and it is imposing itself on other spheres of authority, like other governments in society, like these ones that are illustrated here, then they're acting in what we call a tyrannical way. And that is a government that needs to be restrained and pushed back to operating again within its jurisdictional limit of authority. Now, I told you before we started here, I said I was going to demonstrate to you the practical, real, obvious example of why the four pillars are so key and why the people that are in the faith communities of Canada that responded to those surveys were so wise when they identified them as the priorities. Well, here it is right here. Imagine that you have a civil government that has become corrupted and is now operating outside of the limit of its jurisdiction and imposing its authority on the authority of all of these different spheres of other governments in society. What if society on the whole, individuals, families, and churches, what if they all got together and they stood behind things like, so let's use this as an example. We've seen this just recently in education. They stood behind a parent's right to raise their children the way they want. What if we all got together and used our combined influence as individual citizens and demanded that government operate within its own sphere of authority and put a pillar right there on the jurisdictional limit of civil government and said, that is the pillar to up and the point to up where you can operate as civil government. You can operate up to the point where you start imposing yourself and negatively impacting my ability to raise my children the way I want. That is now reinforcing the jurisdictional limit of civil government. What about the right of belief? What if the second pillar was placed right here between civil government and the individual, and everyone got together and said, you know what, civil government and civil government officials, I'm going to need you to respect and defend when necessary my right of belief and freedom of religion. That is something I'm going to need you to do. So I'm going to plant that pillar there, and me and all of my friends are going to use our combined influence to push you back and restrain you within that jurisdictional limit of your authority, the proper jurisdictional limit of your authority. Now, we could use an example in the church. Something that is very important to the church is how civil government and how society actually cares for the vulnerable among us. And we're called to care about the vulnerable. That's our responsibility. But sometimes civil government uses their legislative and taxation powers, and they actually can cause harm to people. Let's take a look at real life examples here. Euthanasia law that was just passed in Canada not long ago did not put in place adequate protections to protect vulnerable citizens that live among us in our communities. So people could actually be placed in harm's way by advancing euthanasia legally here in Canada, which has proven out to be the case as well. What about marijuana legislation that was brought forward not long ago, making edible marijuana products legal here in Canada? We're seeing more and more people present at emergency rooms here in Canada with overdose from cannabis. Cannabis overdoses at emergency rooms in both Alberta and Ontario, as an example, are 200% and 300% higher than they used to be before. So has civil government placed vulnerable people in harm's way by legislating things that are dangerous for them? Yes, in fact, they have. So we take the third pillar and we put it right there and say, you know what, we're going to require that every law and policy that you pass as civil government at the federal level is we're going to require that the first box you check is to make sure that you're providing for the safety and security of the citizens, with special attention being placed on protecting the vulnerable that live among us in our communities, like children who might have greater access to edible marijuana products, like perhaps you've got the drug addicted who are already having challenges. How are you going to protect them? What about people who choose to use THC products while they're driving? Do we have the proper law enforcement policy in place to protect citizens who might be in harm's way as a car goes down the highway being operated by somebody who's high on THC? So these are how you use the four pillars, is you place them on the limit, the jurisdictional limit of civil government, and you restrain them. Now, can an individual, one person, you or any one of these individuals here, can they alone restrain civil government? Well, the answer is obviously no. When you as a society get together and you transfer authority to civil government to act and to make decisions with regard to legislation and taxation, you're granting them a tremendous amount of power. And as a citizen, yes, it's true, we have incredibly in-depth authorities to act. And let me just give you a couple of examples here. As an individual, you have citizen authority. And we're going to teach you, if you're brand new, we're going to teach you how to use your citizen authority to act. This is authority every citizen has. You're going to be able to use that. You also have something called constituent authority. It is related to where you are living in Canada. You live within a very well-defined jurisdiction of Canada called an electoral district, and you have special authority as someone who lives in that district to speak to what happens in that district and to speak to your elected representative. That is a very specific authority, constituent authority it's called. You also have something called political party membership authority, which we have just recently used to help influence the outcome of a political process within a political party. And you also have, of course, kingdom authority, but I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to leave it to the pastors to talk about that. So as an individual citizen, you have a tremendous amount of authority to act, not only within your sphere of influence and authority, but you can actually influence other areas of society as well. But it is very small in comparison to the combined authority that we've transferred to civil government. So when they become corrupted in civil government, it takes a lot of us coming together, combining our influence to actually push them back. And as a tool in our hands, we have the 4 pillars. So again, I mentioned this during the 4-pillar story. If government goes to, as they're talking about right now, if they want to make a move that's going to expand eligibility of euthanasia to include children and the mentally ill, we're going to use the 3rd pillar and say, excuse me, but there's millions of citizens in Canada who believe that it is your priority to check that box to make sure that laws and policies are safe for people. And we consider the mentally ill and children to be vulnerable. So show us your plan for how you're going to protect vulnerable citizens from dying from a euthanasia death when they shouldn't. And so we're going to require that. We're going to actually mandate that of government. We're also going to use the 3rd pillar to say things like, for example, right now, the Liberal government, the federal Liberal government, has been toying with the idea of the full decriminalization of prostitution here in Canada. Well, if you're going to now take the purchasing of sex and make it legal again, because right now, to purchase sex in Canada, it is in fact illegal. If you're going to make it legal again, you're going to have to show us your plan as to how you plan to protect the young girls and women that are going to get trafficked into prostitution, because you are going to increase the demand for sex in Canada. There's obviously going to be a need for an increase in the supply. I'm going to need to see your plan. He's going to need to see your plan. She's going to need to see your plan. And together, we're going to stand behind the 3rd pillar. And we're going to say, you can't pass legislation or enact policy without making sure that the vulnerable are protected. And young women and girls are being human trafficked all the time into prostitution. And that's just not acceptable. So this is how we combine our influence, stand behind the 4 pillars, and use them as a tool to restrain civil government as they wield the unusual and large power and authority of legislation and taxation in an inappropriate way. So that is how brilliant the church is. Again, bringing it right back to square one. I commend you all. Anybody who responded to that survey and spoke up and brought up these 4 things, they are absolutely ideal for restraining civil government. And I'm very excited to be someone who has the opportunity to advance these 4 pillars into society, culture, politics, and government, and share them with as many people as we can, so that we can always make sure civil government stays where they're supposed to stay. Okay, great. I'm going to leave it there, but remember, you have a copy of this, and you'll be able to download this and you share it with your friends at any time. And this is a very great training template to use for this and a whole bunch of other illustrations. Now, I'm also now going to move over to the big boardroom here, because I want to actually use a real life example that we've just come through to show you what combined influence looks like in actual practice. Like when we come together, what can we accomplish? So let's go to the big boardroom, and we're going to take a look at the Conservative Party leadership election results. And so you can see how this translates when it's applied, like we just did on the National Leadership Briefing not so long ago. Okay, take a quick break, and I'll meet you over in the big boardroom. Okay, we're going to keep things moving here for sure. However, I just want to make a note here. We're going to finish up here in this boardroom, but I want to save time today for me to go back to my desk and speak to you about the civic affairs committees and what those are and how they can be used strategically on the immediate road ahead to continue the momentum that I'm about to show you got started here. Now, if you recall, back in the last national leadership briefing, if you're new today, I'm going to include a copy of the last national leadership briefing. And the reason why I'm going to do that is because I want you to know the story of conservativeupdate.com. That's a website right up here in the center here. It's called conservativeupdate.com. And I want you to hear the story of why it was started, where we were at before, and what the story of what happened as we arrived at the final day of the election of the new leader of the Conservative Party of Canada, because it really does illustrate in its entirety the coming together of citizens in Canada who share views and values, using their combined influence to affect and impact the outcome of an electoral process. It's really quite a success story that you were involved in, and you and all of the people in Canada that were tracking along with that election. It really was a spectacular outcome, and I want you to know that story. But today, I want to really just take a moment to illustrate what it actually looks like. What does, with my own eyeballs, how can I see the coming together of people in Canada rallying around the things that they believe in, using their combined influence? What does it look like when we do that, and what is accomplished? Okay, in the Conservative Party leadership election process, each of the four candidates, and there was four of them, McKay, O'Toole, Lewis, and Sloan. Forgive me, I can use their full names. I just use it because I wrote them that way on the board. This is just one of our planning boards here in the office. And what we did was we had four candidates that got into the race early, and they would obviously get together with their campaign teams and establish campaigns and platforms that they felt would be attractive to the largest number of party members so that they would win the election. I mean, that's what elections are all about, is show me your ideas, tell me what you're going to do, and then I'll make a decision as to whether or not to vote for you. So you got four different candidates establishing four different platforms to present to party members in the hopes that they would win. Well, each one of these campaigns were very different. Each one of their platforms were very different. And we, at the National Leadership Briefing, the people that we serve, we collectively wanted to have influence in that race, in that process. And there were other citizen action organizations across the country who also served other people who wanted to have influence in that race. Well, what's the best way to have influence in the race? Well, if you come together as a group of people, as a group of citizens, defining what it is that you're looking for in each of the campaigns and out of each of the candidates, and asking them to support your ideas as a collective, that we felt was the best way forward. We felt that if we stood up and said to Peter McKay, well, we believe that parents should have the right to raise their children the way they want. We believe that the right of belief and freedom of religion should be respected, or must be respected, pardon me, Peter, by you and everybody else in Parliament. So what we did was we took all of our ideas and all of our policy and legislative proposals that represented those ideas and posted them on conservativeupdate.com. We then invited all the candidates to come and take a look at our ideas and the things that we believed in, and invited them to adopt them as part of their party platforms, their individual campaign platforms. So Aaron O'Toole had an opportunity to take a look at the conservativeupdate.com website, and there's something on that website. It's still there if you want to go have a look at it. It's called the Common Ground Platform. And in that platform are all sorts of legislative and policy ideas that we felt were good representations of the four pillars. And we said, come on over, Aaron, have a look at it. And I'll tell you what, if we start seeing a bunch of our ideas popping up on your platform, you're probably going to get a lot of our attention. So some of the candidates came in and they rolled that shopping cart up and down our aisles, and they just threw all sorts of stuff in the basket. Some didn't throw very much. They actually probably closed their eyes and went la 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 as they ran by some of them. But that's what politics is all about. We're not going to be attractive to everybody. but some of them really did enjoy checking out the website. We also got them to share their views on what they saw at the website. We wanted to hear from them. Like, as you were at the website, as you were looking at our ideas, what do you think? And let us know, because we're going to cast a ballot as members and pick one of you to lead that party. That's how we all came together. Now, I told you I was going to show you what it looked like and the kind of impact you can have when you all come together. All right. And I'm going to show you one specific part of the electoral process to illustrate this point. Okay. There is a series of balloting that goes on. I can't go into the whole process because we just don't have time today. But during the electoral process, on a leadership election process within a political party, they have rules of how you count the ballots. Well, they had a what's called a preferential ballot where you ranked your candidates, and at the second ballot stage of the process, we could see very clearly who was in lead and who was coming up to take the lead, and how many individual citizens and party members were supporting each of the candidates. Well, one candidate in particular that I just want to use as an example, and that's Dr. Leslyn Lewis. She was somebody who actually rolled her shopping cart up and down the aisles of our website and really kind of liked the ideas. I mean, she really did like the whole concept of parental authority. My goodness, of course I support that. That's something I really think is a priority for Canadians, and I think it's important for them. I'm going to speak to that issue as part of my campaign. And she did. She spoke to parental authority. She spoke to right of belief, freedom of religion. She spoke to protecting the vulnerable. And she, of course, spoke to, and actually, in all fairness, all the candidates had a pretty clear view that fiscal responsibility was a critical part of their platforms. So that was Leslyn Lewis. Now, brand new person to politics, never held a seat in the House of Commons, never been a politician before. She's a career lawyer and mother, and somebody who entered politics and just wanted to put her best foot forward and offer to serve. And during the second ballot, here, I just want to get out of the way here and show you this. During the second ballot, Erin O'Toole, who is a member of Parliament, Peter MacKay, who is a former cabinet minister and member of Parliament in the Harper government, they both had 56,907 votes and 54,165 votes respectively. Now, each one of those numbers is one person in the party. Leslyn Lewis, however, on the second ballot, when you counted up the total number of individuals who supported her ideas, it came out to 60,316. Now, you can look at the outcome of the race and you could say, well, Doug, why are you pointing that out? Because in fact, it wasn't Leslyn Lewis that actually won the day. It was Erin O'Toole that won the day. He's the leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. But when you take a look at the numbers and the breakout of how many people supported the ideas that Leslyn Lewis put forward in her platform, and you take a look at how closely her platform really did represent the views and values of the people who also believed in the four pillars, you can see that it was very popular with a very high number of members in the party. And those members came from conversations like the one we're having right now, where if you come to the National Leadership Briefing and you come on the briefing once a month, I have made a commitment to you right at the very beginning. I said, is that if you come on once a month, I will continually scan the horizon of the political and government landscapes of Canada, and I will look for opportunities where we can use our combined influence to insert ourselves into political processes, perhaps like this one, where we can actually impact the outcome of the election by advancing our ideas into the conversation. That is exactly what happened here. And we ended up having an election during the leadership election race that included a tremendous amount more conversation about parental authority and right of belief and freedom of religion and protecting the vulnerable. We had more of that in this election than we would have had if we had not shown up at all as a combined group. So this is what I wanted you to see is the number of people that you can gather together, rallying around the same thing at the same time and imposing themselves or inserting themselves, I should say, into an electoral process, you can really impact the outcome of the process. Now, you might say again, well, Doug, again, that wasn't the winning number. Ultimately, it was other numbers came forward. Let me just ask you this question. If we continue to look in our lives for the people that share our views and values, who believe in the same things we believe in, and we continue to invite them onto the National Leadership Briefing, and Doug Sharp continues to do what I have said I'm going to do and have done, and scan the horizon for opportunities where we can insert ourselves into these conversations, can we take 60,000 people and turn it into 160? Can we turn it into 260? Can we turn it into 1 million? How about 5 million? Because I'll tell you, the 4 pillars, one thing I have found since I've been doing this 18 months ago when we started the National Leadership Briefing, I have found that the 4 pillars are very attractive to not only the people in the pews of Canada, but also a bunch of people that perhaps aren't familiar with church life outside of the church. There's a lot of people out there that agree with you and me that the government has not been adequately caring for the vulnerable and has been reckless as they rolled out things like marijuana legislation. We can really come together and rally around these ideas and influence the outcome of these electoral processes, but we've got to come together. And that's why I'm suggesting that you, even if you're new today, there's nothing that's keeping you or holding you back from inviting somebody to the next National Leadership Briefing that's coming up in October. We're going to be covering some very exciting things on that briefing. And if you have your friends come, I guarantee you, you won't be disappointed, neither will they. Because we're going to be talking about some very big things. One thing that's coming down the pipe that we've all been hearing about is the possibility of a fall election. Well, if we have an election in the fall, we've got to be ready and we've got to be clear in our minds as to what it is that we're going to be listening for from the candidates so we know who to support during that election. Well, that's why we come together in the National Leadership Briefing, and I'm excited to serve you. If that happens, I'm going to be right here with you, walking that road with you, and we're going to be able to have a huge influence on the outcome of that election coming up. So anyway, I hope you're as excited about that as I am, because that is a big deal when you can get that many people focused on the same thing at the same time. All right, now I'm going to roll over to my desk here. As I said, I want to finish up with a conversation about civic affairs committees. And if you don't know what that is, stick around. You're going to hear real quick about what it is and the importance, the strategic importance of the civic affairs committees moving forward. And keep in mind the 60,000 people that were advanced into this conversation that really support the 4 pillars, because I'm going to use that number when I speak about the civic affairs committees moving forward. Okay, I'll be over at my desk. Let's take a quick break, and I'll see you over there in a second. Bye for now.
Look, it's really interesting. It's a repudiation, frankly, of what Aaron O'Toole described Peter MacKay as essentially Trudeau light. They don't want that. They don't want this progressive conservative idea that Peter MacKay represents. And the social conservative movement is significantly more robust, more powerful, and more influential than it ever was, by the way, under either Scheer and or Harper. So that's going to be a massive factor here.
Okay, let's finish up here. Now, what a great day. Thanks so much for joining us. I am so excited to have so many new people on the briefing. If things went fast and move by you quickly, I encourage you, please do not just feel confused and leave. So much is explained over time here on the National Leadership Briefing. And again, those who come on the briefing and attend every single month, those people are the ones that build that brick upon brick upon brick understanding of what it is that we're talking about, and they are the most effective. And if you cannot come on a briefing at the time of the broadcast, please continue to encourage others to come on at that time, but you yourself, you will receive by the end of the day a copy of the briefing and all of the resources that are shared during that briefing. Okay, so let's wrap up here. I just wanted to finish up again here, as I mentioned, with civic affairs committees. We did some training back not long ago here on the National Leadership Briefing about the importance of establishing within churches, within your own church, infrastructure to support the efforts of your pastor in surveying the landscape in your local landscape, and knowing what is happening and where the opportunities are locally, where you as a church family can have influence. The things that you can engage in locally that can make a significant impact in not only your communities, but regionally and across the nation. So civic affairs committees are going to be a focus of the National Leadership Briefing moving forward, and it's going to be prioritized to the degree where every briefing from here on in for the foreseeable future, I don't know exactly how many we're going to do, but we're going to keep at it until we're absolutely confident that you have enough information so that you can form within your own church families your own civic affairs committees. Again, it is infrastructure in your church to help support the efforts of the pastors so that they can know locally where the opportunities are, where they can have influence, where you and your members of your church family can have influence and advance the 4 pillars locally. And again, I'm going to remind you all, if it wasn't very clear right off the get-go, we're not in this thing and advancing the 4 pillars just because we want to win. We know that the 4 pillars, when implemented in society, culture, politics, and government, will prosper our neighbors and our nation. It is good for people when you respect their right of belief. It is good for people when you allow them to raise their own children. And when you protect the vulnerable, it's obviously good for them as well. So we are here because it's the right thing to do. We're really pleased that you're with us, and we hope that you keep your eye on the horizon with us as, again, we focus more and more attention on establishing those local civic affairs committees in churches so that we can build infrastructure around the pastor and support them in their work and in their efforts to advance the 4 pillars. Okay, thanks so much for your time today. We're going to leave it there. Remember, you're going to get post-briefing notes later on today. It's going to have all of the things that I referenced in there. It's going to have templates. It's going to have the speaker notes for the 4 pillars. It's going to have all sorts of things for you, but make sure you give time to review that so you can help share that information. And of course, don't forget to invite as many people as you can who share your views and values to the next National Leadership Briefing in October, because it's going to be a good one. So until then, and until next time, may God bless you, may God bless your family, and may God, of course, continue to bless this great nation of Canada. Bye for now. In the fall of 2016, a series of surveys went out across the nation to talk to people, centers of influence, people within the churches of Canada, people that were sitting in the pews. Parents were receiving them. Many people in the faith community received these surveys and were asked questions about what they felt were the priorities that we needed to focus on moving forward. We asked them what was important to them in their communities. We asked them about the things that we should be supporting and the things that we should be rejecting in the way of ideas out there. But what was interesting to note was when you looked at all of this information and the data that was collected, all of these expressions of concern could be reduced down into 4 silos, or what have come to be known as pillars. We set aside everything that can divide us. We set aside all of our denominational differences, all of our different political views, all of our different things that could possibly distract us from the things that we unify around. And these are the 4 pillars that we rally around here on the National Leadership Briefing.